Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo here with another deck tech for the new Kamigawa cards. This time it's going to be a mono blue deck. The reason for building this deck was the fact that Essence Capture has been reprinted in Kamigawa. This is a card, so it's counter a creature spell, and you put a +1/+1 counter on up to one creature you control. This is a card that saw a lot of success back when Tempest Djinn was in Standard, so Dominaria era cards, also Curious Obsession. This was one of the main ways to kind of press your advantage in those old decks, and I wanted to try this card again since it had been reprinted. Interestingly, it's been a while since we've had a way in Standard/Alchemy to reliably counter creatures for 2 mana. We haven't had Essence Scatter, we haven't had Essence Capture. You could sometimes do it with like Jwari Disruption or Syncopate, but you couldn't do it consistently. So this is a pretty powerful effect, and it's an effect that people may not have adjusted to. I mean, certainly there hasn't been a reason for them to adjust to it yet. So how are we going to surround this card with things that work with it? One of the things we need is 1 mana creatures. So there are 10 1-drop creatures in this deck. 2 Lantern Bearers, which I think is the 3rd best 1-drop. If you like something other than Lantern Bearer here, certainly you could swap it there. I don't think Lantern Bearer is great. It's just you need... I wanted to have 9 or 10 1-drops in my deck with Essence Capture, and this is what I deem to be the 3rd best. Then I think probably the 2nd best, maybe it is actually the best, would be Thousand Faced Shadow. This is a new card. It's a 1/1 flyer, primarily for a blue mana, but it does have this ninjutsu ability for 4 mana, where if you can ninjutsu it into play, meaning if you have an unblocked creature, you can spend 4 mana and put this into play from your hand, and it's going to be attacking. And if you get to do that, then you get to put onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, a copy of another attacking creature. So you need to start with 2 attacking creatures. You need to have at least one of them get through unblocked. Then you can ninjutsu this into play, and then you'll be able to make a copy of whatever the other creature is. It's a token, but importantly, it doesn't go away at the end of the turn. So this is a way where you can kind of steamroll a game. Once you get ahead, if you get the ability to do this, you're going to be getting just a free advantage, which is a free copy of a creature, and it's going to be in play attacking, and it's not going to go away. So that's a pretty big advantage if you can pull it off. There's a lot of steps to it. So you have to be happy with a 1/1 flyer for a blue to put this card in your deck, but it is a 1/1 flyer for a blue that has pretty substantial upside. Then the other really good 1-drop is Delver of Secrets, which is obviously a legacy all-star. Delver does really ask you to play a lot of instants and sorceries in your deck to make it function. So as we go through the rest of this deck, we're going to see there's a lot of concessions to try to make Delver as good as possible. Starting with, there's 4 Considers. Playing with Consider isn't really a concession, it's just a good card. But 4 copies of Consider, I think you really couldn't play a Delver deck without playing 4 of them in Alchemy. 4 Fading Hopes. Again, you need some amount of creature interaction, and the fact that it's an instance is good for Delver. Also, it's Scries, which can help you set up the Delver. 1 Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce has come back into Alchemy. I don't think that Spell Pierce is generally that good of a card in standard power level sets, just because you always have the option to play Negate instead of Spell Pierce. And when you know that the game is going to go longer and the game is going to involve casting spells or running to counter spells that your opponent's going to cast that cost more than 1 or 2 mana to play, oftentimes Negate is just going to be the more reliable answer. But Spell Pierce in a tempo deck, Spell Pierce makes a certain amount of sense. I've got 1 in my deck. I don't think it's a card you'd really want to have 4 copies of. But, the 1, you're going to be able to find spots in the game where it's going to allow you to do 2 things in a turn, and you're going to be happy to have it. 4 Jwari Disruptions. So this is a card that is not one of my favorite cards, but I wanted my lands to be able to flip to Delvers, which is why I've got 4 copies of it. 2 copies of this new card, Moon Circuit Hacker. So it's a 2/1 ground creature for 2 mana. It also has ninjutsu of a blue, and it has an ability that if it deals combat damage to a player, you can draw a card. If you do, you discard a card unless it entered the battlefield this turn. So if you're getting to ninjutsu this into play, say off of just, you know, a 1/1 flyer that's getting through, you ninjutsu in this into play for a blue, and you just get to draw a card, and you've profited a 2/1 in play that your opponent's going to be incentivized to block or answer in some way. This is a pretty efficient card. I only have 2 of them in this deck because I'm trying to focus more on flying attackers. That might be a mistake. I do have 4 of this Spectral Adversary, which is a 2/1 flying flash creature that you can also sink more mana into to phase out creatures. You can, or I guess you can phase out creatures, artifacts, enchantments, including your opponent's stuff. So this is a card that it's pretty powerful if you can sink a lot of mana into it, but it's reasonably efficient for 2 mana. 1 copy if you come to a river. This is another bounce spell. It's also a way to make a creature unblockable, give it an extra power. So that's not that good with these ninjas, forcing them through a second time because they both only get their really good ability the turn that they come into play as a ninja. But you can finish off a game like this. In the 3-drop slot, we just have a couple more creatures. I'm not really sure which creature is better between Dreamshackle Geist and Grazilaxx. I wanted to try Grazilaxx in particular because of this ability. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand. I think there's going to be boards where you're going to have 3 or 4 creatures in play, and you're going to attack with them all, and they're going to block some and not block others, and you're going to be able to bounce some of your ninjas back to your hand because they got blocked, and then ninjutsu them into play. So it's kind of a way to continue to get value off of the ninjutsu ability once you've already got the creatures in play. Also, just having an ability for whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. That obviously is a way to really snowball a game if you can get a turn or 2 of hits in with all of your small flying creatures. 2 copies of Invoke the Winds. It's a new card, so gain control of an artifact or a creature, untap it. It's quad blue and 1. It's also a sorcery, which is pretty important. So that's important because it works with Delver. It's also important because it's not an enchantment, meaning that your opponent can't, there's no permanent for your opponent to destroy, which would allow them to regain control of their artifact or creature. They have to bounce the card to their hand and then recast it if they want to regain control of it, which most decks aren't going to be capable of doing that. So this is just going to be 5 mana, take their thing, and they're just not going to be able to get it back. They're going to have to kill it if they want to get it off the board. 4 copies of Seagate Restoration. As I've said before, I really hate this card as a card you're planning to cast for 7 mana. This is just in the deck because it flips Delvers. I'm sure every once in a while I'll wind up casting this, but this 95+% of the time, this is just going to be a land that deals 3 when it enters the battlefield, but hopefully flip to Delver when it was on top of my deck. Mostly basic lands here, not even snow basics because the deck is literally just all islands. You want access to potentially triple blue on turn 3 because you're going to want to cast a 1-drop and leave up Essence Capture in some of the games, so just all blue lands. 1 Otawara, another bounce spell. Maybe you could try to fit in a second if you really wanted to. I'm still trying to figure out how many copies of these legendary lands to play in decks. 2 copies of Hall of Storm Giants just because I think it's a great card. It doesn't really particularly fit with the theme of this deck, but it is good, especially if you get paired against the creatureless control deck. If you can force them to do something where they tap out on their turn, you can really punish them by hitting them with a 7/7. Moving on to the sideboard, there's actually a lot of good options for the sideboard of a mono blue deck like this. So I've got Annuls, which is kind of an acknowledgement that Kamigawa is bringing a lot of pretty good artifacts into Alchemy. And also there's good enchantments, you know, Sanguine Brushstroke, Wedding Announcement, which I have no idea if it's really called Wedding Announcement, Wedding Anniversary. The fact that it has 2 sides, and there's also a card called Wedding Invitation, I believe, means that the odds that I say the name correctly are really low, but I'm talking about the white enchantment that's pretty popular. Thieving Skydivers. This is a card that basically hasn't seen any play up until now, but I think that there's enough new artifacts that are good to steal, especially like the 2-mana vehicle, Reckoner Bankbuster you can steal with this, that I think that this card is certainly worth a try at this point. Invoke the Winds, which is just another copy, in case you play against somebody who's playing, 4 and 5 mana artifacts or creatures to steal, you might want it. Some Disdainful Strokes and Negates just to be able to get the right counter for whatever matchup you're playing. And then 4 copies of Ray of Frost. I think Ray of Frost is a really, really incredible removal spell against, obviously, a red creature deck, which would be red-green werewolves, a dragon deck, mono-red. So the fact that as a mono-blue deck, you get access to such a good removal spell is very, very appealing for a mono-blue. I'm not sure. This is a standard legal deck. I'm going to play it in Alchemy, but if you're somebody who's focusing on standard, this is entirely standard legal, which is nice. All right, let's go give it a try. All right, this is the kind of hand I'm looking for from this deck. We got 1-drop into Essence Capture or Spectral Adversary. A little bit of interaction. Oof. I was hoping they were out of Spikefield Hazards. This is just red-black. All right. I think that I'm just definitely going to counter if they play a 3-drop. I would have countered it here. No 3-drop from them, so let's get this guy into play. Hopefully they can't kill it right away. My hopes have been dashed. Maybe I should have waited a turn so I could Fading Hope it. This card is not looking stellar. See what they hit here. I guess I needed to Fading Hope my guy. So they couldn't just play another instant speed removal. This may be a mistake on my part. Sadly, all of my creatures died. I guess I'm going to start working to potentially being able to cast this. I maybe should have put 1 or 2 Field of Ruins in my deck. Why'd you play a land first? All right, Delver. Here we go. Please don't kill my Delver. No Electrostatic Blast, please. A Braid. Yeah. Could have been worse. Could have been better. They could have had a land in their hand. I think I need some more durable creatures for this kind of a matchup. Alright, I'll just take one of their more durable creatures. I have all basics except for the Otawara. Otawara is screwing me. What happens when this dies? Some cards get discarded. So I can potentially erase this. I'm going to take 9 this turn. But if they don't kill the Dreamshackle Geist, I think I can kill them in 3 hits. Maybe not, actually. Oh, they're attacking Numing back a Townraiser Tyrant. That's not good for my general health. Oh, it's a City Soccer Connoisseur. That's fine, actually. Didn't they have a Townraiser Tyrant? I don't think I can afford to attack with the Townraiser Tyrant. I need it to potentially eat a Den of the Bugbear. Okay. This is pretty reasonable. So I have to attack with the Townraiser Tyrant for this ninjutsu ability to come online. But I get another Townraiser Tyrant. Oh, but it has to be tapped and attacking, so I'm dead. It did a lot of damage, and then I died. They can just animate the other Den of the Bugbear. I don't know that there was anything I could have done there. Invoke the Winds seemed actually pretty strong. Come to a river seems really bad. I think I want to trim on the Fading Hopes just because they have so much removal, it's really hard to play a tempo game. So I want Disdainful Stroke against their deck. They really do have a lot of expensive cards. So maybe Disdainful Stroke is better than Spell Pierce. Perhaps I should have had something like Imrith in my sideboard. Just something that's hard for them to just kill with removal. Like it's nothing. Hopefully I'm going to just be able to run them out of Spikefield Hazards this game. I'm sensing Spikefield Hazard. Do you have any more? Played this untapped, but didn't cast a spell. Not sure what that means. I would have thought if they had an instant speed removal, they would have just played it on their turn because they'd be fearing that I would have a spell that could protect the creatures. We're really patient. They even took the damage. Wow. This is a cool new card, the Biting Palm Ninja. Need 4 mana to use this to save something. I think I'm just going to attack for 2 and play the Lantern Bearer. Keep the Thousand-Faced Shadow in my hand. Thousand-Faced Shadow would be nice to be able to ninjutsu next turn, which is what makes it better to cast this Lantern Bearer rather than disturbing the other Lantern Bearer. Because if I disturb the Lantern Bearer onto the adversary, then I don't really have the option of using the ninjutsu ability next turn. Wasn't a bad exchange for me. I think I'm going to get adversaried here. What do they got? That's good. Igneous Inspiration or Electrostatic Bolt. Those things are not good for me. This is not conducive to my general health. I can actually kill a lot of my creatures. But not if I put the Lantern Bearer on the Thousand-Faced Shadow. This permanently has haste. So if I draw a land, I can just steal this. It will untap and be able to attack right away. Ninjutsuing. When you only have one creature, it doesn't do anything. I'm just going to play this into the start from scratch. Because if they spend their 3 mana on start from scratch, maybe I'll be able to just use Invoke the Winds to steal the adversary and kill them. So much damages. It's a bad sign they didn't use their blood Sensing I'm dead. All right. That was a close game, at least. A tempo deck is always going to struggle against a deck that's just a pile of efficient removal spells. That was not the matchup I was looking for. Turn 1 Lantern Bearer. Is it good? Who knows? Should I leave up Jwari Disruption? Or should I play the Thousand Face Shadow? I think I should leave up Jwari Disruption. Hope to pick off a Werewolf Pack later. Even if I don't get to cast it, then next turn I will have access to Jwari Disruption plus Thousand Face Shadow. You're not the land I was hoping for. I'm going to Essence Capture onto the Delver. I have the option. I could Spell Pierce that, but it doesn't do anything. So what's the best card I got on top of my deck? Maybe Seagate Restoration, because it flips the Delver and it's an untapped land, so then I could ninjutsu the Thousand-Faced Shadow. To make a second Insectile Aberration. It's the less exciting to reveal Jwari Disruption. Not going to be much of a surprise with that one. Surprise. I'm going to kill him in 2 turns either way, so that the counter from the Essence Capture doesn't actually speed up the clock. Meaning I think it's probably better to just play the Jwari Disruption when I can. This would cause them to gain 1 life. I don't think they have any reach creatures they're going to be able to cast, so I guess I'll stop that. Fading Hope would have been good on one of the many turns where they played a Blizzard Brawl. This is an exceptionally greedy deck that my opponent is playing. You generally don't play Blizzard Brawl in a 2-color deck just because you're forced playing all basic lands. So this is the matchup that I wanted Ray of Frost for. We'll be bringing those in. What to take out, though? Maybe Invoke the Winds I should take out. They're going to have a lot of 2 and 3 mana creatures, which Invoke the Winds does not line up well against. I'm going to take out You Come to a River. Take out one of these Moon Circuit Hackers, too. It's a little bit scary playing a deck like this on the draw. What? Sideboard Plummet. What? All right. I'm not going to use a Fading Hope on the Tenacious Pup. It's the 1/2 doesn't hit hard enough. I know that eventually this card will be good. Also, if I bounce the pup back to their hand, they would get the triggers again, which the triggers is the majority of the value of this card. I'm beginning to sense they probably have a lot of removal spells in their hand, or they have double green cards and they're getting bitten by their greedy mana base. We're actually going to see a Seagate Restoration this game, perhaps. So I can go end of turn Spectral Adversary, make it a 3/2, protect it with Spell Pierce or Fading Hope, which is nice. What do you think the odds are I'm about to Spell Pierce a Plummet? Before I saw the first Plummet out of their deck, I would have guessed 0%. Holy cow. We've now seen it all. And by all, I mean we've seen a Spell Pierce Plummet. Not too bad. I didn't play my Seagate Restoration there as a land just because I still think I might want to be able to cast it. But it is keeping me from being able to animate the Hall of the Storm Giants. I don't think I'm likely to want to do either of those this next turn. Maybe if I draw an untapped land, I would actually just play Seagate Restoration. I didn't draw an untapped land. I'll just admit my mistake. I think we're gonna, their hand probably has like 3 copies of Werewolf Pack Leader in it. I'm not sure which is better between the Grazilaxx and the Dreamshackle Geist. They've both actually been pretty good in this game. Halana, holy cow. Can't let my opponent have a Halana. 2/3 reach. Wouldn't be able to beat that. They're not dead, but they're dead if they attack because of the Hall of Storm Giants. Turn 1 Delver. Not bad. Actually, I have a 1, 2, 3 curve. Does anybody else think that this land really looks like a green-blue land? There's so much blue in the Slitherboar image. Every time somebody plays this, I think that they're playing green-blue. Which it's always in a green-black deck, so I always think that I'm playing against a Sultai deck when someone plays the Slitherboard pathway. I guess they held off on the flunk because it wasn't going to be able to kill the Delver. Never been Grazilaxx flooded before. It's an unusual experience. So I think if they had Meathook Massacre in their hand, they probably would have played it last turn. So I'm not going to hold back. I'm just going to keep jamming creatures into play. I just have a lot of copies of Binding of the Old Gods. So what do I want to do here? I could ninjutsu the Delver. Of course, then I just get a 1/1 that can never flip. I think I'm going to actually just ninjutsu the Adversary. And I'll spend this last mana either on Fading Hope or Consider, depending on what happens. I did that backwards. I should have played ninjutsu and bounced the Delver. This card, I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around what to do with it, which is kind of weird because it's really not that complicated of a card. So here the Delver doesn't get to flip, which is a little sad. Should be able to kill them though, because I can flash in the Adversary and I have access to Essence Capture. Oh no, it's Storm the Festival. That actually could be difficult for me. Probably not though. It's Curran the Boundless Sky. Spectral Adversary is a very powerful card. So this seems like the kind of deck that Disdainful Stroke is very good against. Also probably Negate and Invoke the Winds. Spell Pierce also seems fine. Is Essence Capture actually good? It might not be. They had a little bit of stuff, but not that many creatures. Also, I don't think you want a ton of Fading Hopes in this kind of a matchup. Annul could be good. They played Binding of the Old Gods and Disika's Chariot. Maybe I just want Annuls over Essence Captures. Let's play one Essence Capture. This should be the kind of matchup that this deck excels in. Going under decks that are just kind of clunky and a little bit susceptible to permission. These tempo decks tend to struggle against decks that are like my first opponent, where their deck is just filled entirely with cheap instant speed removal. They're also not great against decks like my second opponent, where you're just playing against other cheap creatures, because generally cheap blue creatures are just going to be outclassed by cheap creatures in other colors. You really, to get a good matchup for a blue deck like this, you really want to play against... They just have a main deck Curse of Leeches? Really weird. You want to play against someone who is not particularly fast and is very susceptible to all of your soft counters. Or just all of your counters. I don't actually have that many soft counters in my deck right now. I didn't enjoy that one. I feel like I'm just going to die to Curse of Leeches, which is very odd. This thing flips into a 4/4. It's not good for me. Tameo. I guess I need to Disdainful Stroke that. I would be able to attack it, but it's going to take so much attacking to actually kill it that I don't think it's reasonable to do that. I do have these Dreamshackle Geists, which are going to be able to take care of my opponent's stuff. I should have played this before combat so that I could keep it locked down. Keep that locked down. Tap that even though it doesn't matter. Their Curse of Leeches is going to flip, but I'm going to phase it out. What happens if this thing dies? They could search for lands, or they can make a big ground creature. gained so much life this game. Life gaining, it just doesn't stop. How can I win this game? I need to draw my control magics. I think I'm going to have to block the Leeching Lurker and jump the Hollow Hinge Wrangler. And hoped to draw Invoke the Wind. Kind of lost their creatures that game. But one of them was the Leeching Lurker, which doesn't even get cast as a creature, so I couldn't hit it with Essence Capture. On the play, which is certainly what this deck wants. So far, I haven't seen a ton of 2-mana stuff that I really would want to Jwari Disruption. They might play a mana ramping creature there. But I think it's better to just get the clock out. Jwari Disruption's so likely to be good on subsequent turns anyway. Thousand Face Shadow, you failed. You flunked. You didn't do a good job at all. So hopefully they play a 4-drop here, I Disruption it. Then they play some sort of 5-mana creature that I just Invoke the Winds. Ooh. This is pretty nice. I'll take that action. I'll draw a card. Thank you very much. I always enjoy it when Annul is a playable card. It's been legal for a while, but it just wasn't really a viable card, I would say. Oh, now we're getting to loot. I can loot away the Seagate Restoration. I don't need to worry about, am I actually going to try to cast Seagate Restoration? That's nice. I don't know if there's enough matchups where this thing is just going to be able to attack, because the 2/1 ground creature is so small. But if we actually get to play where there's a lot of boards like this, that's a pretty good card. I may have messed up by saving my Disdainful Stroke when I used the Annul. Obviously, it would have been nicer to Disdainful Stroke the 4-mana card than to have Annul for Meathook Massacre. Binding of the Old Gods. No, I want to have a creature in play so I can have Grazilaxx do something. Grazilaxx? I think they should have just named it Grazilaxx. I want to play this as a land, I guess. If they play a creature that could block, I'm going to invoke it, and then I'll still be able to ninjutsu. This is a pretty nice refill. So I can attack with the hacker here, because if they block it, I'll be able to use Grazilaxx to bounce it back to my hand. Then I'm going to ninjutsu this into play, bouncing the Lantern Bearer, which is going to give me a second copy of Kuro, which I'm going to legend rule. And I'm going to make the Spirit. Then I'm going to ninjutsu this thing back into play for the Thousand-Faced Shadow. And get a bunch of triggers. That was a very eventful attack step. I enjoyed that quite a lot. Oh, you don't get a card per thing that deals damage. You just get one card. I was wondering why I wasn't getting more cards. Well, that was that deck in action. I don't know that that has the potential to be a top tier deck, but it wasn't that bad. It was fun. If you like that style of deck, I think you could definitely win some games on the ladder with it. And I'm glad I got to show off that interaction with Grazilaxx and the ninjutsu creatures, because I do think that that's kind of, it can lead to some pretty cool turns like that last turn of that last game. If you haven't already, please sub to the channel. It's continuing to grow, and I'm going to be putting out a bunch more Kamigawa videos in the coming days, and you won't want to miss them. See you then.